You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. As always, I am your host, Danny Ashes. I'm here with my co-host, Trey, and our guests this episode are DJs Greg and Dagger Dance from Club Nevermore in Arkansas. Today we're going to be sort of returning to form in a more classic style Cemetery Confessions episode. And we're going to be talking about topics around being goth in the southern United States, what it takes to get a club event up and running, and the experiences and intricacies of participating in our most holy of sacraments, the goth club. So let's start where we always do and get to know our guests this episode. If you can tell us about how you were first introduced to goth and a bit about your history as a DJ, sort of paint a picture of processes by which you grew into goth or alternative culture and how that took you to where you are now.
So for me, it's kind of strange because I never really called it goth necessarily. This would have been for me back in the 90s when I was going through the end of middle school and into high school. I grew up as an MTV kid, and my experience with music was directly through music television back in the day when they actually played music videos. And I used to stay up and watch 120 Minutes. I'd stay up and watch Headbangers Ball. I initially started off as a metal kid. And I still hold a place in my heart for metal music. But I really started to get turned on to the gothic subculture of genres of music with, more of the mainstream stuff like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, Nine Inch Nails, stuff like that. It wasn't until later on in my life that I started to develop a taste for the whole plethora of other stuff that's out there that you never did see on MTV. So that was kind of my genesis. Was I was kind of, kid that used to wear black all the time, kind of had a dour demeanor to me, didn't fit in with any of the cliques that were going on in the small town that I grew up in. I grew up in central New York, near Syracuse. And there really wasn't per se anybody else that fit into the stuff that I liked. I played D&D and, all the kind of classic nerdy things at the time, which are now all cool.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, man, I wish I could have grown up now, But you get picked on, you get beat up, all the things that you go through going through school and going through all the different cliques and stuff like that. So that was kind of my genesis, was my experience with music from 120 Minutes, MTV in general, and Headbangers Ball that got me interested. My first concert that I actually ever went and saw was Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, and Alice in Chains. It was called Clash of the Titans Tour. And it was in 94, and nobody knew who Alice in Chains was at the time. So it was kind of cool.
I was going to say that one had to be the odd one out there.
Yeah, yep. But that was a really cool experience. It was at a dirt track speedway in Weedsport, New York, which got on the touring list because the singer from Anthrax, Joey Belladonna at the time, because they flipped back and forth. They had the guy from Armored Saint in there for a little while. But anyways, he grew up in Weedsport, New York. So he made sure that date was on the tour. So anyways, go ahead, Dagger.
Oh, okay. So mine is probably indirectly because my mom, and I'm going to preface this by saying my mom wasn't goth. She was just, there in the 80s. Listen to Cyndi Lauper, the popular stuff of The Cure, the Depeche Mode. You already imagine what she could look like, but she was a party gal, party diva. But she would listen to that stuff, and I like that stuff. But this would have been back in the 90s, and I didn't have the internet until, the good old days of dial-up. So I guess when I was about 11 or 12 and we got dial-up at my dad's house, I went and actually explored things on the internet. and what was it back then? There was LimeWire, and there was like that Yahoo Radio that was really slow. It was kind of like
Shoutcast, maybe.
I don't know. It was kind of like Pandora in a way, because you could like a song, I guess, and then play more of that. And that's how I got into, not the poppy Friday and Love kind of crap like with the Cure. No offense, but I am so tired of that song. TBH. But
perfectly reasonable, I think. Yeah.
Yes. You hear it in TJ Maxx now.
Yeah. It is. My spouse and I have a joke about how often every time we walk into a Target or wherever that the Cure just randomly starts playing when we arrive. It's just
it makes me feel old.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I found like Christian Death and stuff. And then I guess also when I was 11, I don't know, I just decided I'm going to wear all black. I used to be a horse girl in like elementary school, but like I lived in Shirley, Arkansas. And if you don't know about Shirley, Arkansas, there's this documentary on HBO called Meth Storm, as in methamphetamine storm. And like you can just learn basically all you need to know about Shirley right there. That's where I'm from. And so I was like, I think the town population was like 300.
Yeah.
In Bible Belt. And like, I don't know, I was just a weird kid. I never got physically harmed. I'm going to say that. I'm luckier than some. But I did get a lot of, shitty comments, people messing with my locker, being an asshole kind of thing. And this was back, probably in the early 2000s. And do y'all remember where everyone went through that phase where you got that haircut that was like really short and I guess edgy layered in the back and kind of longer up front? I don't really know what it's called. A lot of alternative people were really into that hairstyle.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a name, but it was a choice. But y'all know what I'm talking about. I got that haircut, and there was this girl, and stereotypical popular girl, sheriff's daughter, and she started spreading the rumor that I was a lesbian and not to go to the bathroom with me because I'll molest the girls, that kind of crap. And like I was kind of in the closet back then. Like I knew I liked girls. I didn't know it was pansexual because I didn't know that was a thing back then, but I knew I liked girls and boys and stuff. So it was just, but that's about like the most intense, I guess, kind of things I faced in high school for being weird. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just the small town life. I don't miss it. But, I don't know. I'm not going to say it made me stronger or anything like that because I don't know. But, I sure stood out.
Yeah. I definitely know what that's like. Actually, that you reminded me, and I can use this as a follow-up question, but when you were talking about Yahoo Radio, I remember there was a software called Shoutcast, which was basically a music player, but they had an option where you could stream music to other people as a sort of like your own radio station, but it was based on your own internet bandwidth. So when I was in high school, I would stream. I thought it was the coolest thing, but I could only have like 2 people listening at once because of my whatever dial-up my parents had. But I left my computer on 24/7 just to run my playlists, and that's sort of how I got interested in the idea of DJing. So I'm wondering where that came from for you.
DJing, like, okay, stick with me here. This is a kind of goofy story. So when I was 15, I decided I wanted to be an art major, and my dad is, we don't talk. He's a narcissist. You already imagine what that is. I'm not going to get into that because I'll be a letdown of a conversation, but he was very much like, you can either go be a doctor or you can go be a business major. And, you're 15, you think you have to do what you're told.
Wow.
But so I was like, well, I'm not smart enough to be a doctor, so I'll go be a business major. And so I concocted this little plan that I was going to open a nightclub, a goth nightclub somewhere in the world. And at 15, that seemed realistic. So I stuck with that plan. And, it's just not the most realistic thing ever. So when I heard in the goth group on Facebook, 2 or 3 years ago, I have no sense of time. Time isn't real, but it was about 2 or 3 years ago.
I'm with you.
That Gary was looking for DJs. I was like, you know what? I have a wide range of music taste. I know sometimes I listen to Dolly Parton, but I know what to play on a goth night, and I listen to a bunch of stuff. But I signed up, and he said, yeah, you can DJ, and I DJ'd at Club Nevermore.
Every good goth appreciates Dolly Parton. I'm just gonna say
and
that.
You could definitely follow up some Nick Cave with Little Jolene.
I played the Jolene cover by Strawberry Switchblade probably more than you would like to hear it at this point.
What about you, Gary? Yeah.
So I was going to say for my entrance into the world of DJing, I was still back in New York because I moved and lived all over the country. I lived in Texas for a while. I was out in the Bay Area, California for a while, and then I moved out here with my wife. But anyhow, I had a little small circle of other misfit friends that didn't really fit into the other cliques that were out there. And one of them, my friend Jerry, got into EDM and rave music. And he was spinning vinyl, and he had a group of friends that he met through the scene and going to shows that were out of Syracuse. And I learned basically starting off how to DJ doing vinyl. And I just remember being in a basement at this dude's house, and he was like, this is really easy if you want to try it. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, all right, you just need to count to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You just follow the beat like that, and you get into a rhythm. You can tap your feet, tap your hands, whatever you need to do, keep the rhythm, and then that's how you do your song transitions. This one's coming in on a beat, and then you match that beat on this side. And it was a little bit more complicated than that, obviously, because you're dealing with the older technology of vinyl, and there's a lot more knobs and things to twist and spin, play with. That isn't to say that there isn't a bunch of buttons and blinking lights and crap on all of the appliances that you can plug into your laptop now. But, that was kind of my first experience into DJing. And it was, for like 20 kids in somebody's basement. We were just doing a little underground rave type of thing. And it was about a year after that I moved to Houston and met up with the lead singer of I guess it's synth pop would be the best label for his band. It's a band called Provision, and his name was Bry Kaiser. He started off with Retro 80s with me, and we got together and started doing a Retro 80s night, and we called it Red Square. It had this whole Soviet communist theme to it, and the flyers that we would put together were old Soviet propaganda posters.
That's awesome.
And we did a Retro 80s night in downtown Houston for about a year, and that really whetted my appetite to do more. And from there, I decided to move to do my own night. I was getting more into agro-tech, industrial, goth, a variety of other different genres other than the 80s, because I grew up with the 80s. Like I said, I was an MTV kid, but I wanted to do something a little bit more underground, so I came up with a night called The System. And we started doing The System at this little place called Jet Lounge. And again, it was like, 20, 30 kids would show up and stuff like that. And there really wasn't anything going on playing what we were playing. The big night in Houston was Numbers. And they're still there to this day. You go to Houston, you go on a Friday or Saturday night. Friday nights is the general catch-all night. They play all kinds of stuff. Saturdays is usually Underworld, and that is their kind of goth-esque night. They've switched it to kind of being once a month now. And then there's Das Machine, which is kind of a play on Das Bunker, which is more of an industrial agrotech night. But that's kind of the long story of how I got into starting to DJ.
So where does Club Nevermore come into that then?
Oh, yeah. So to tie that whole up, so was in Houston for about 8 years and did The System down there during that period, and moved to California, moved to the Bay Area. One of the things that motivated me that I picked up in Houston that I had an interest in New York that got me out to California was I'm part of a theatrical suspension group. We do flesh hook suspension. And I started off in the Houston chapter of CORE and did performance on stage with them and did their marketing, and then decided to stay with that, but hated Texas. So my wife and I, who I met in Houston, wanted to go to California. So we moved out there, and we had a chapter in San Francisco Bay Area. We also had a chapter in Los Angeles area, and moved out to the Bay Area because my wife was like, no, you won't like me if we go to LA. So we ended up settling on the San Francisco Bay Area, and brought our daughter with us. And I'm very thankful that she had that experience because she went through some of the greatest schools that we have in the country out there. out in San Francisco, I brought the system with me from Houston, and I started doing it out there. And there were several other nights, as you would imagine, in San Francisco and Oakland going on. And I ended up getting absorbed into a more industrial night called D-Machining that was going on. And it was going on in underground. It was basically a studio apartment. And we had like a set of stairs down at the bottom. You'd knock on the door and they'd like slide open a little window and they'd take a look at you and be like, okay, you can come in. And you'd go upstairs and there was like this bar area. And then another room had a dance floor with a DJ set up. And
so it was like they, you had to, was there like a dress code? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
But it was also because we were trying to sidestep around liquor rules and liquor laws. The area has a lot of rules, as you would imagine any city, major city does, concerning, having a bar and things like that. And technically, it was a private party, so you could just say, hey, I'm having a private party. But we had to always keep a mindful eye on that, because there was the possibility that an undercover cop could show up and get somebody in trouble.
Threw on a Funker Vox shirt and was like, I'm one of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, your shoes are a little bit too weird. But I started working with those guys and then was vacillating back and forth doing D-Machine and doing the system. Met up with another DJ, DJ Unit 77, who's still DJing out there now. He's actually going to be opening for Front 242, which is going to be happening this weekend out there.
Nice.
Okay.
And from that experience, I continued to do the system and D-Machining. We did several other nights, another one called Vector. But anyways, what ended up happening was my daughter got to the age where she moved away and went to college. She went to UC Santa Cruz. So she moved out of the house. My wife and I were like, okay, it's time for us to get out of here. It's $2,100 a month in rent. This is ridiculous. We looked all over the country. We settled on Arkansas because she has family in Texas. I have family in New York. It's kind of in the middle. So what we ended up doing is moving out here to Arkansas, and there was nothing here when I moved here. And this was around 2017.
Wow.
And there had been some stuff going on years and years ago at like Vino's and a couple other venues that I've heard about through other folks that are older that have been here in the scene for a long time. And one of the other DJs, Wilhelm, used to do a night up in Fayetteville, Arkansas called Darkness Resurrected, but that had been closed for several years. So I came out here and I'm like, well, I need some sort of nightlife. We got to do something. So I decided to create a Facebook group to see if there was interest. And I created Little Rock Goth Industrial and started inviting people, and word of mouth and other people joined. Dagger joined, the other DJs that we DJ with, they all joined. We built a little community. And the idea was, by building this group, we could then go to venue owners and say, hey, we want to do this club night at your club. We've got all of these people that are interested. See, look at this Facebook group.
Right.
And that was the sell pitch, and it worked. So that's how Club Nevermore came about.
That's cool. I remember when I was trying to find clubs, all age clubs like that weren't in the city when I was a kid and trying to get into it. There was this sort of gothic-esque aspect to like finding listings of goth club nights online, but you call the place and it's like a business park now, so there's just like these ghosts of club events past and you can't find it anymore. So it's really cool when that kind of comes together and you create something new. As far as I know, you were doing Club Nevermore on Twitch, as most everyone was for a long time, and that's sort of started back up again as far as in-person stuff is concerned. Trey and I also recently started going out to events, and so I'm interested to hear what that experience of returning to a club space was like after being away for so long.
It was a jubilant experience. Probably the best descriptor to give you, because when you do Twitch, you lose so much of the element of DJing in general, the kind of soul of what you're doing.
Mhm.
Because as a DJ, you're there, and sometimes you're hidden depending on the club that you're playing in. You know, they got the DJ booth off in a corner
Right,
somewhere, dark, and you can't see what the hell's going on. Or you're like up there, you know, and there's a spotlight on you, and you're like dead mouse and a headset. But there is this relationship that happens between what you're doing up there and what's going on the dance floor, what's happening in the seating area. And you just don't have that with Twitch. You can't see the people you're playing the music for.
Right.
They do. So it kind of turns into a show. You know, you almost feel like a cam girl in a certain aspect. Like you have to like dress up and put on outfits and do makeup and like have this great background and everything else. And you
shove stuff up your butt. That might have just been me, but
well, you know, as long as you're getting tips for it. You start to get this, you know, mindset where you're moving away from originally what you're there to do, which is play music and have kind of a party atmosphere and have people socialize and hang out. And the best kind of analogy that you could create to that is the chat room that you have on Twitch, you know, and that we tried to focus a lot more on, you know, we did a variety show where basically we had different segments. And this was actually through some discussions with Dagger about trends that she was watching with folks on Twitch. Because at the time, for a while there, Twitch was just gaming people. And then all of these DJs started flooding in. And then it was kind of like Wild West. It was like, can we play this? Or we're going to get shut down. We're going to get muted, et cetera, et cetera. We did a variety show and tried to get people to engage with us. We did like a cocktail segment. Dagger did a makeup segment. We did it like a DIY crafts thing. I did a drink segment where I showed people how to make drinks at home. So we were trying to be more engaged. We had a trivia segment where people would like, you know, chime in on the chat. So we had the best that we could with the situation that we were provided, but I was so glad to go back into the club, to be honest with you. It's just a totally different atmosphere and different energy and vibe to it. There was apprehension, you know, because we got this whole COVID thing going on. It still isn't gone. And living here in Arkansas, I think we're at 58% of the state is vaccinated. So we are definitely trailing behind a large portion of the country. You know, we've actually recently gone into, we're requiring proof of vaccination or negative 48-hour COVID test to come in. So there was a good 3-week span there before Delta came out. And we were like, cool, everybody's getting shots. It's going to go back to normal. And then it's like Delta, and we're like, oh, shit. You know?
Exactly.
Yep.
I will say I saw a couple of your Twitch streams, and I don't like talking in Twitch chat just because usually I don't know anyone, so I already feel awkward. And then also everyone there can see what you said, rather than if you're at a club, you're talking to like 1 or 2 people. But I will say the thing you brought up about how you broke it up into segments, I think the way you did it was the best implementation I've seen in any kind of DJ Twitch chat stream to make people feel comfortable chatting. So I think you did do a really good job with that.
Thank you.
Dagger, I'm sorry, Dagger, what are your pronouns?
They, them, she, her. If I'm in drag, and I'm not right now. I really don't mind she, her, because, you know, my drag really looks like Pamela Anderson got in the clown makeup. So, but right now, you know, for the most part, they, them. Yours are they, them, right? Too?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And Trey goes by the entity that will not be named.
I just go by whatever you want. I'm totally pronoun non-discriminatory. Call me whatever.
Dagger, what was your...
Okay. So I'm going to say before COVID, the only exposure I had to Twitch was from my partner, Phil. watching gaming streamers like that Happy Hob guy and that, what's his name? The really popular one. His real name's Charlie, but he goes by Moist Critical or something on there. I don't know. The gamer guys. So like, and side note, Charlie Moist Critical, whatever his name is a fine man. But anyways, besides the point, that's the only exposure I had to Twitch. So it's kind of like, are we going to do good? I'm not sure, because, it's just gamers on there really. But like, I think we were pretty poppin'. We were set apart. I mean, I'm not going to toot my well, I am going to toot my own horn, but you don't see a lot of drag DJs. There's me, and then there's Novelli, and that's the only two I can think of right off the top of my head. But we did good. I think we did great. We were kind of set apart from everyone else. My thing with Twitch chat, everyone can see you, and you got trolls and people who are gonna, I don't know, say anything. Maybe they might say, "Oh, your makeup sucks" or whatever. That's just the internet. That's just how it is. But I don't know. I just didn't care. I'd say what I want. If I was thinking about like, hey, what if we reinvented popcorn as a breakfast food? I just say it. But that's a stupid thing to say, but like,
that's a fantastic thing to say.
It was goofy. I feel like if you're saying that kind of shit, kind of maybe help some people talk. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking that, but I would just say whatever. I know it's Twitch, it can be weird talking on the internet. I don't really do it much, like on Instagram, but unless you message me, because Instagram, I don't understand how it works now, and I don't understand TikTok at all. I need like some 18-year-old to explain TikTok to me, because I do not understand that one. But going back in person, I'm gonna be honest, before COVID, I really didn't get out of the house much. Like, I went to the grocery store and stuff, but like socially, I'd go like to the gay clubs when I can get someone to go with me, and I wasn't busy. So it wasn't like during COVID, I wasn't super. It wasn't a super big change for me. But going back, I don't know, it was like you're just starting right up where we left off. Like when we went back to events, I didn't feel like a beat was skipped. I think I hugged a few people, and I guess hugging people was a little surreal, but I don't know. It was nice seeing people again. Twitch, I feel like I had kept DJing, and I was going to have to go back to Twitch. The only way I would do it is like if I played a game at the same time, because that's what Twitch wants. And like, I don't even think you can play music on there anymore at all, period.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some people still are, but you can be, banned at any time, basically.
Yeah, so it's, I don't know. Yeah, like I bought a green screen and all that stuff, but I would only do Twitch again if I played games, and the only game I play is like Animal Crossing, and no one wants to watch that, so.
I'd watch it.
Oh, thank you. But in-person events. Okay, so the only thing I had about in-person events is I'm in nursing school, and like I didn't, being in person again is, I wasn't doing clinicals at the time, so I hadn't been around anyone who had the corona that I knew of. But I just was kind of worried as a nursing student to be around, because but I never got sick, and no one else got sick that I knew of, and everything was safe. And I have both my vaccines of Pfizer, and
it's really good to hear.
Yep.
Well, let's bring this all the way around the pentagram. Trey, as a attendee and not someone on stage in charge of things, what was your experience going back to a club like?
I was really a lot of just sort of getting back to form. It almost felt like nothing changed, but there was that huge gap. But getting back in there was really enjoyable. I really liked being finally back in the club space. I did try to watch the Twitch streams during the pandemic, but I'd always forget about them. I was never good at that. I caught a few, but not a ton of them. It would always be like, oh, I want to do this Twitch stream with this one DJ that I heard about. And then it's like just wrapping up, and I'm like, oh, I had a thing tonight, didn't I? So it was just, it was harder for me to keep track of, for some reason, these virtual events, whereas in-person events didn't really have a problem with. So having the in-person events coming back, it has been really good. I've still been hit and miss on, how comfortable I am with things. Obviously, I've gone to the two most recent nocturnas and had a great time. Though the first one was a bit overpowering in the amount of people that were there. It's the first opening, and everybody had been out for over a year and just had a lot of pent up need to get out and go to the club. And even though it was comforting too, but even though it was, you needed to be vaccinated, you need to have proof of vaccination and all that, though it wasn't mandating masks at the time. It was still a really, really crowded night, which, I'm not as big a fan of the really crowded nights because I just have trouble getting around a little bit more. But it was enjoyable just sort of hang out, chat with you, hang out on the overlook, looking over the dance floor and all that. So it was a good night. The second time I went the next month was a little bit better. And then going out to the Le Petit Mort one weekend was also really good. That was more regular, true to form. That hadn't changed much. It's a smaller night. The only issue there was the bar that it's held at had, since it hadn't had live events for so long, kind of reverted back to a bar space. So they didn't have really a dance space. It just had tables, and they didn't have a lot of chance to move things out of the way. So it was not a good venue for dancing, but it was still good. And then I went out to an outdoor concert thing. Well, I went out to the one with you, Danny, on, what was that, Monday last?
Vision Video.
Yeah. So that was really good. And that was actually pretty crowded too, surprisingly, but really very enjoyable. And then I'd been to another sort of outdoor drum jam concert, belly dance type thing. It was earlier that same weekend. That was really a lot of fun, but a lot of chances to get out there and dance. And I but decided to opt out. Almost went to Cold Waves this weekend. I was wanting to go to the Friday night show to see, particularly see, why am I blanking now?
Yeah, something that I just saw that came up pertaining to Cold Waves. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a group called Caustic.
Yeah.
And the guy that does that project is, I don't know, like 50 other bands projects. One of them is called Clack. And it was him and this other dude, and they decided to stop at IKEA in like Schulenburg or something like that, Illinois.
Okay.
And they just opened up the back of their van and like put out some speakers, and they just did a live performance in the IKEA parking lot.
Nice. So yeah, the band I was trying to come up with was Clipping. Clipping was the one I really wanted to see.
Oh,
Gotcha.
Just because I hadn't seen them, and they're just not really, they aren't a band that I expected to see at a Cold Waves either, since they are kind of out there. I mean, yes, it's experimental and sort of noise stuff in the background, but the overall genre is rap.
Yeah.
But I was really, really wanting to see them because I really enjoy their stuff. I like their rapping. I think Debbie Diggs is an amazing rapper, and having that over sort of soundtracky noise collage type background music is really cool. So I'm sad I wasn't able to go, but I wasn't feeling that comfortable with the scene, at least from previous experiences in Cold Waves. It tends to be absolutely mobbed.
Yeah.
So whether it was going to be that case or not here, I didn't want to go. They're not cheap. I didn't feel up to going out there to be put off by the crowd or whatnot. So I didn't end up going to that, but I did see some pictures, a few people that went. Sounded like it was a really good night. I know Front 242, they played there on Saturday too. That was the big show that was sold out like months ago. Yep. But yeah, so that's been my experience. It's been really good to get back. It's getting me out and about and seeing people again, making my legs and hips hurt as I'm dancing again, which I've been just sort of sitting around the house for a couple of years. So it's been definitely out of shape. But I did discover I could dance for a solid hour with a mask on. So that was a good thing to find out.
That's a workout in itself. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, as far as dancing goes, I actually, that first night out, I kind of realized I don't really dance very much because I'm very self-conscious and have low self-esteem. But I realized that, like, it kind of remembered is that you can't really have a social outing at a club because it's just, unless you're doing something after or you're hanging out with friends, it's really hard to have any kind of meaningful conversation over music. And so I just kind of realized, like, if I just get over myself and, you know, there's a whole bunch of people around, we all look like idiots, like, it's not a big deal. But yeah, it was kind of bittersweet for me because I have an 8-year-old, and when we went, like you said, Trey, they didn't have a mask requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And so any of the times I did talk to people, I could feel their breath going into my eyeballs, and it's normal. Like if you chat at a club, you feel some, spittle on your face every once in a while. But now, now with COVID around, that's like a pretty terrifying thing. So I think I'm only going to be going to outdoor events now. That's one of the reasons why I didn't even consider cold waves. But it was surreal because I had been watching Twitch streams, and the DJ was on stage streaming it on Twitch and also in the chat. So I would pop into chat and she was responding in chat. So that was real weird because we were in the same room. And I loved when you made the comment that you no longer had to Shazam things because you just checked the Twitch stream to see what was playing. I thought that was fun. It kind of felt like the first time I went to a club in general, because there were so many people there that I didn't know. And so it had that sort of feeling of being a stranger in a strange land, but also feeling like I had always been there or I'd always belonged there. So it was just a really nice, cathartic, other than the fact that with that many people comes people that you don't want to interact with, which can make it uncomfortable to move around and do stuff because you don't want to run into them. And I'm sure every scene has that issue. But, that's just part of just kind of remembering what it's like to be in a club, I think was the intriguing part to me after having stepped back from it for so long. And actually, maybe just to follow up on that, do you two have any go-to dance moves when you're on the dance floor?
I don't really dance at the golf club because I too am self-conscious. That body dysmorphia, though, you know. And I don't know. I've had someone make a comment about my body. Yeah. That kind of tore everything down from ever dancing at the golf night that I was at. So no, but I love to Vogue, but you can't really Vogue to golf music unless it's like really fast paced. So not for golf night. I don't know. What is that orb dance? Is it called the orb dance? I'm not making fun. I'm just genuinely asking.
I don't think I've heard that one before.
I don't know. Yeah. Like do y'all know what I'm talking about? It looks like they're holding like an orb.
Oh,
playing
yes.
with it. I don't know. Yes. I'm not making fun. I'm just genuinely asking.
I do know what you're talking about.
I actually did have a friend at one of the first clubs I went to. He got really into close contact juggling, and he would bring the actual crystal balls onto the floor. And he wasn't great at it, but he'd be doing there with just dancing and doing the crystal balls, being all like Jareth.
Yep. Looking for babies to steal.
Yep.
And I'd say for me, I'll get out there and dance, but usually I need to get primed. So, I'll hit the bar, and then I get the liquid courage going on, and then I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just out there kind of reenacting the Matrix scenes or something, I think, out there.
I mean, that works. I mean, looking at the slow-mo scenes from the Matrix and taking that as your cue to dancing is very effective.
Yep. I mean, when I was growing up in upstate New York, I used to go to this club up there called The Haunt, and it's in Ithaca, New York. And that was my first experience with goth clubs in general. Then there was another one in Rochester called Vertex. But when I would go there, I would kind of watch people and kind of wallflower it, and then I would just get out there, and it was almost like I had a guy come up to me, and he's like, "Man, where do you go for your Tai Chi?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You're doing some fantastic Tai Chi moves out on the floor." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, well, and I just made some shit up, there on the spot, But yeah, it's very similar. A lot of slow, fluid, intentional movements is what I've been successful with.
Yeah, when we went to the Vision video show, Dusty, for one of the songs, said something along the lines of, I want to, I need everybody goth dancing. I need to see everyone's arms flailing around in the air.
I think he mentioned everyone needs to be clearing the cobwebs or something along that line.
It reminded me when I had our wedding, a friend of mine who was there, who was kind of my goth mom when I was younger. We had like our goth friends and then our family and stuff. and she was on the dance floor with the guests who weren't goth, showing them how to, stomp the hobbits and sweep the cobwebs and stuff. And it was super cute. And it made for a really fun environment. All right. Well, let me ask, I want to talk a little more about Twitch, because it's such a weird, interesting thing that happened to our scene that I don't know if it will ever happen again. It's kind of like those 2 summers where Pokemon Go was really popular. So I'm interested what you found to be benefits of Twitch. Like some people I've heard say, because there isn't a dance floor, it's easier to play just music that you like, or weird songs that don't necessarily fill the floor and that kind of stuff. What did you have a lot of people that were from in your scene or out of your scene? Did you make different connections? What was that kind of thing?
I feel like it was half and half from what I remember. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I guess I'm chaotic. If I want to play a song, I'm probably going to play it. I mean, I did eventually grow to where I'd play half quote popular, more popular, songs like, Love Like Blood, Killing Joke and stuff like that. And then I played the other half, more obscure stuff. But I don't know. On Twitch, I kind of basically did the same thing. Sometimes we would do themed night kind of things on Twitch. I don't know if I ever dressed up for really any of those. I don't know. I kind of did, like, my thing with the drag thing, I kind of just wear what I want. But I try to fit the theme sometimes if I can think of something. Sometimes my 30-year-old brain doesn't want to think of anything, but I don't know. I don't know. I lost my train of thought. Oh, we had theme nights, and sometimes we try to fit the playlist to the themes. Okay. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was easier to play, stuff that you may not necessarily want to do out on the dance floor with folks in front of you. Well, because there's a couple of benefits that I saw out of it. Was one, like I was talking about, it kind of pulled us out of a comfort zone of just being DJs, and we all had our own side hustles that we were doing. Like we had our own little things that we were putting together for our segment that kind of showed other facets of personality, which I thought was really cool. So we were able to show other stuff that we do aside from DJing. That was really fun. And then the thing that I liked is, because I've lived all over the country, I had folks, and some of the other DJs had folks from all over the country and sometimes from other countries coming in and listening to the stuff that we were playing. Whereas, had the pandemic never happened and we just continued on in Little Rock, those people never would have been experienced to what we were doing.
Right.
That was really cool that we went from a small local, very small local, because, we don't have a big market here, to a global market where we've got, a dude from Germany that came on and stumbled on.
That's really cool.
That was really cool. So those are some really positive things that I thought came out of it. And another one was I got to know a lot of other DJs in other cities. Because I would go out and look on Twitch and see what other folks were doing and start researching, attend their shows, their streams, and I would talk with them. And I got to meet Tina, who does a goth night at Milk Bar in Denver.
Oh, yeah.
And met her online. I'd actually been to Milk Bar because my daughter moved to Denver, but I didn't know anybody when I went to visit my daughter. And then that night, my wife and my daughter wanted to hang out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to a goth club. So I left and went and sought out the local club. And like I said, it was just kind of me wallflowering, walking around, didn't know anybody. But then later on, through Twitch, I met her. So that was cool. And there was kind of a league. I wish we had gotten together and organized better as DJs as a whole. So like Saturday nights, there wasn't 75 other streams all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do? And the big nights that already had established brick and mortar locations that had been going on for years, they already had a built-in audience.
Yep. They got all the attention, I think.
They were the ones that succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so Dagger, you mentioned you do just kind of play whatever you want, but is there a sort of, at Club Nevermore specifically, like types of like genres or bands that you try to stick around, or is it truly just like whatever alternative shit you want to play?
I feel like I was, I guess, the sewer rat, because I would play like the post punk, the death rock, the goth rock for the most part.
Okay.
I don't know, like, I guess if you're meaning like all of us, what all of us played, it was like, really, really wide range there. But if you're talking about like what I specifically played, I mean, I mostly stuck, and maybe this is kind of like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have, but I stuck mostly to like death rock, post punk, and goth rock. Sometimes I play like anarcho punk. I think that I did that a couple nights. To be honest with you, that didn't, not a lot of people out on the dance floor for that kind of stuff, but it was expected, not a surprise there, unfortunately. But those are the genres I kind of stuck home to. And then, I think I eventually, I guess, in later times, included more dark wave and new wave, because I do love that stuff too, but people like to hear that more than Roz Williams screaming. Unfortunately, but it's not unfortunate, it's just the truth of things.
Gary, what do you stick to a genre spectrum, I guess?
I tend to, if you were to look at a variety of sets that I've put on, I would have to say they tend to more be EBM industrial. But again, a lot of what I'm playing is dictated by how I'm feeling, like in that week or so when I'm building my set lists. If I'm kind of down about things, it may take more of a darker interpersonal kind of feel to it. Or, if I'm just kind of pissed off about work, it may be more aggressive. But I try to, I have a formula. I try to play 2 well-known tracks and then something new or obscure.
Yeah, I used to exercise that sort of thing to get people on the floor and then try to play something that kind of fits with them, but is so totally different. So I found that to be a really good way of introducing people to music.
Exactly. Yep. So that's kind of the formula that I've kind of stuck with.
Well, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, my formula eventually, well, for the most part, would be like play, The Hanging Garden by The Cure, and then insert something like Vision Video, or One Track or something, and then, Love Like Blood, Killing Jokes or something like that. That kind of became my formula sometime, well, for the most part, but it worked, I guess.
So something old people might know, followed up by something similar that's new that people might not know.
Yeah, because, I'm not saying Club Nevermore attendees, but a lot of people, they just want to kind of hear what's poppin' and popular, which is fine. But, there's also new stuff out there, and I don't have to get on my soapbox about that. That'll take an hour, but, there's people still making music. It's good music. It's great music. You got to kind of push it on people a little bit, but it's there.
Yeah, most people just want to hear that playlist they heard that first time they ever went to a goth club, and they want to hear that over and over for the rest of their existence.
Well, it's interesting because, I think one of the things I noticed was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, far more people were complaining about, all they ever play is 80s and 90s stuff that are the songs that are popular that we've heard a million times. And then I think I noticed, at least from my own experience, that there was less of that, but what emerged, because there was so many new bands, what emerged was the sort of new, this is like, if you went out, you'd always hear a Drab Majesty and a Lebanon Hanover and like Mulchat Doma. It was new bands, but they sort of settled on, these are the popular new band songs, and you heard a lot of that. Not to say that's bad or anything, but well, so let me get a feel for like how long are each of your sets? How long, like when does the night start and end? How many people are DJing? What do the other DJs do for that night?
So I try to be as democratic as possible when I do my nights, and because I've played for other, with other teams where like you get stuck with the crap slot in the beginning where there's like 8 people there and you're playing from like 9 to 9:45 and that's all the whole night. It's like, man, that sucked. So what I try to do when I do the scheduling for the nights is figure out A, how many DJs we have, and then B, how long do we have? And then I can then do the math and figure out at least 2 sets. So everybody will get, say, a 30-minute set when it's slow, and then everybody gets a set 30 minutes later on when it's hopping. So you may go on, at 9:30 and play for 10 people, but then you're also going to get like an 11:30, 12 o'clock slot for 30 minutes where there's going to be a lot more people there. And that's generally what we would do is between 30 and 45-minute sets.
Right. Okay. What do you close? Do you not always close at the same time?
Well, with Twitch, it varied.
Right.
Based on how many people, stuff like that. We tried to stick to a schedule. But what we're doing now is we run 8 to 2 a.m.
Okay. So
we've got a good 6-hour block there to fit a whole variety of different stuff in. And some months we have 4 DJs, some months we have 5, sometimes we have 6. We've also thrown into the mix generally a 30 to 40-minute live performance. So that has been local Arkansas bands for the most part.
Oh, cool. And
coming up this next month on the 9th of October. That's going to be the first of our Halloween things that we got going on. We're actually doing a burlesque performance.
Oh, nice.
Ordinary for us, at least. So, and then November, we're looking at having a band come and play. So, we're trying to not just be a dance night. We're trying to throw in a couple other things here and there to give people a variety of different things, because you really have to sell to get people to come out. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, even before the pandemic, it was hard getting people off the couch. And then, you got the pandemic and you've got, the vaccine hesitancy and all these other elements that are coming in. It's difficult to get people to come out when you've got music at your fingertips anywhere you go. Yeah.
That's really cool, though. There aren't that many nights that do that kind of thing. There was a night local to us that called Darkwave that doesn't exist anymore, but they had a live performance every night along with the DJs. Release the Bats or Hollywood did a similar thing, but that's really cool that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, I have a friend up in Madison who runs the Club Crucible, and they do a similar thing where they'll have various events like that. They might do a burlesque thing or acrobats or stuff like that, along with nights, or maybe not along with, but some nights would have that in addition to a regular club night. I've only been up to see their club once, though, and it was just a regular night at that time.
Yeah, I went at Bar Sinister a couple of times. I was out in LA. Yeah. They would have, variety acts. Like I saw some fire juggling people and hula hoop people and stuff like that. So yeah, they had some cool stuff going on there too.
I dig it. I always love to ask this question. Are there any infamous songs that get requested all the time that you can't stand listening to anymore?
You go first, Dagger.
I don't know. I didn't really take a lot of requests, but I'm going to be honest. Please don't crucify me out there. But if someone anything Marilyn Manson, and he's recently come out with the abuse allegations, and that makes it about 10 times worse. Yeah, anytime that happens, it happens, but anytime that would happen, or I'd hear one of those songs, I'd be like, oh my God. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't really ever see requests that were too out there. I mean, I played Ariana Grande on my last set, so hey, but the reason for that was I was wearing me a high ponytail myself, and I was in the drag, so it was my final night with Nevermore, so
perfect.
That's why I did that. But yeah, Marilyn Manson, I guess.
I'm with you on that.
People who maybe come in and they'll put Cradle of Filth on there. I've never seen anyone do that at Club Nevermore, but I just feel like, it's 2021.
Yeah.
You can get on the internet and find goth bands that are goth, but that's a conversation that'll probably make someone mad. So we don't have to do that right now. So.
Well, I agree with you for what it's worth.
I would have to say from my experience, it's been different here in Arkansas as opposed to, say, Houston or the Bay Area or New York, where you have the internet. And before, if you've DJed pre-internet, it's a different landscape in the sense that you go from town to town and there was the local club favorites that the local club DJs played.
Mm-hmm.
And then the internet came onto the scene, and you could have a kid in Mongolia be listening to, the latest track, that Trent Reznor and Health did, and he's totally down with like the latest stuff that's coming out right now. Whereas before it was, whatever they found at the record store, or whatever band happened to tour, near a city where they lived. That's their experience for the music. But with Arkansas, it's kind of this weird mix of folks that are kind of isolated in the sense of knowing a lot of the music, having the music knowledge. And then there's some folks that are super into it, and they are all about the latest and greatest stuff. Mm-hmm. So the requests haven't really come hard and heavy to us per se for Club Nevermore. It's generally, The Cure or Depeche Mode are the couple bands that off the top of my head, I would have to say get requested if we do get requests. But generally it's mostly folks, just jiving with whatever we play. They're just happy to go and having a place to go.
Yeah. I really appreciate that insight, especially, just sort of in a meta way, because as a podcast, I think it's important to hear about scenes that are just as important as the big cities that have like tons of people, to hear what's going on there. But also, when we went to see Vision Video and we were chatting with Dusty, he mentioned that he said he played a bunch of shows where they're just small towns that don't even have a club or a scene. And those were some of his favorite to play, because you get all the just people that come out are so excited to be there, because there is, once you have a big scene and you're in a big city, it's really easy to take it for granted. So he said just the passion of those people was really wonderful to see.
Yeah. A weird phenomenon we have in the venue that we're in is it's this long building. It's almost like a strip mall. And on the left side of it is Area 51. And then on the right is it used to be called Neighbors Pub, and they switched the name to Alibis. But it's more of a local watering hole, lots of oak bar type of furniture and things like that, pool tables and stuff. And we'll have folks from that side of the building walk through the doors and come over to our side because they hear the music playing and stuff. And a lot of times they stay. And, these folks, are not to stereotype, but, flannel wearing, cowboy hat, blue jeans, they're into country and western, or they're into R&B. And they come over and they're like, I saw you guys, and, some of the people who are coming in there, they're kind of scary looking, but y'all are friendly, and, the music's pretty good. And, I think I'm going to come back and bring my friends. And that makes me feel so good, because it's expanded their worldview,
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing that.
Yeah, I always get, I think people get kind of worried about, are they people going to come in and, get in a fight or just shout insults or whatever. But that's really lovely to hear that it's been mostly positive experiences.
Yeah.
Well, since you kind of brought it up, I'll do this messy segue to ask about fashion, because I do think that clothing is relevant to goth, but just clubbing in general.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's sort of like an expression of the art of the community, right? So maybe if you can paint a picture of what you would see as far as the spectrum of what people are wearing at Club Nevermore.
You get a broad cross section of different fashion types. What a lot of folks in our part of the country run up against, and I myself run up against, is your outlet for buying any type of clothing is extremely limited to Hot Topic, or maybe a cool record store that like has some neat stuff, some clothing as a kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
But growing up in upstate New York, I kind of already had to deal with that. So like you'd walk into Sears and be like, oh, wow, that's a rad button down shirt that, they just happen to carry that fit the kind of look that you were going for. So sometimes you could work with that. But other than that, you're dealing with Amazon.
Yeah.
You're ordering crap off of Amazon or through the companies direct through Shrine or you know, any of these other companies that are out there. But a lot of them, they only deal with outlets. They only deal with, you know, Amazon, or you have to go to Hot Topic or things like that. So from what I've seen, you know, it's the staples, you know, T-shirts, cargo shorts, you know, fishnets, corsets. And then some folks, it's just, you know, they've got, you know, we talked about it a minute ago, Marilyn Manson T-shirt on, a pair of jeans. So we don't necessarily have a lot of folks that go all out like you would see like at the church in Dallas, you know, where they have spent hours on their makeup and their appearance, and they have finally curated every piece of jewelry that they have. And, you know, they have some serious character that they're bringing to the table. I'd have to say, to be honest with you, Dagger was probably the best dressed person we would have at our events. She would spend a lot of time putting together what she was going to present to everybody at the night. And she became an icon for that. So people really looked up to, hey, you know, Dagger does these amazing outfits and I want to aspire to that. And there were several girls that would follow basically the personas that Dagger would put on.
I also aspire to be as cool as them, but you know.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, it's a broad cross section, but it's not like you would see in Chicago or New York City or LA. You know, it's toned down a little bit, but it's also an income thing.
Yeah,
you know,
it's true.
Yeah.
You know, folks aren't making, you know, the six figures like they are, you know, coders and stuff out in San Francisco, you know, Silicon Valley, where they can drop, you know, $400 on a pair of boots or something, you know.
And I would assume the thrift store, there won't be options there like you would get in a bigger city for making an outfit.
I mean, I've seen a few cute things at thrift stores around here, not like that goth people wouldn't wear, not, you know, not, I'm not just saying things that would like be something you could drag up, but I'm talking about like something, but like, you know, you kind of do have to look out here. I don't know. There's some little mom and pop kind of places I found some cute jackets at, but you just kind of have to look out here. You know, there's not a lot of goth people who are like, yeah, I think I'm going to give away my my combat boots and my winkle pickers, or as my friend calls them, Rumpelstiltskin boots. You know, it's just not a common thing to give away out here or find much of. So I saw a lot of like, you know, okay, I'm 30 and I wore those platform boots when I was a teenager, and I stopped wearing them around like when I was 18 or 19 because they hurt my feet. There it is. And I don't know. I just feel like, you know, the outfits and stuff I wear now just wouldn't work with, so, you know, days of the past, but those seem to be making a comeback. The platform boots, I guess, the Demonias and the, what are they, New Rocks.
People don't buy Demonias if you can help it. Like those things
those hurt, and they hurt.
Yeah. I DJ'd a show once and I had a 7-inch platform Demonia boot on and the whole thing snapped off. So I had to like duct tape it together so I could walk around.
You busted ankle. Yeah.
What else? Those, what are they? The bondage upper, like they're they have a name, but you know what? It's like the leather. Harnesses are popular now. What else? I don't know. That's about all I really noticed. You know, we do live in a, you know, kind of blue collar area, so you see a lot of t-shirts and jeans or, you know, pants, so, which is fine. I would make my own outfits a lot of times, and a lot of my wigs and stuff, and do the big dramatic makeup. So I did that because I guess, you know, I used to have the Death Hawk and the patch pants and all that jazz, and I guess it come from like a DIY perspective, and then I woke up one day, I was like, hey, I'm gay, I think I want to do drag, and so I started doing drag and trying to make things. So I guess I personally come from a DIY kind of thing, so I want to make my own outfits if I can and have the time. And I guess if there's one thing you can say about me, I was probably the brightest, shiniest person in the room. So
And what Dagger was keying in on the DIY aspect of it, I think it speaks to a lot of the original, when goth kind of started to separate from its parent punk. There wasn't Hot Topic around or anything like that. It was pretty much, you want a ripped up shirt, you ripped it up, you put some safety pins on it. You made your own look. You distressed your shirts and things like that, or your pants. And I think we have a feeling of that, going on here, because you can't find, all the nice shiny outfits and stuff that you see all of the models, on Black Craft or, wherever, online stuff.
Yeah, I dig it. Well, kind of speaking of Black Craft, the other question in a broader sense, I guess even beyond Black Craft, is to ask if you had any thoughts on the fashion of our scene being used by people outside of it. Like, there was a recent article in The Guardian about goth fashion making a comeback for celebrities and just fashion in general.
It's because it's fall.
Everybody seems to have an opinion on that.
Are you talking about like Megan Fox and Khloe Kardashian?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing, like goth, quote, quote, goth fashion, quote, quote, remember that part. It comes back every few years. It's real cool to put on the, fuchsia lipstick and the moto jacket for a few weeks. I don't know. I mean, I don't really pay attention to that stuff anymore, I used to get mad about it and be like, that's not real goth. They don't have every Alien Sex Fiend album out displayed on their kitchen wall, and like, it doesn't really matter, we know Khloe Kardashian isn't out there bumping, This Cold Night or, The Creatures or anything. We all know she's probably not. Maybe she's going to surprise us that one day and tell us she is. I don't know. But it just is, it gets popular for a while. I know Billie Eilish has been called goth, and I'm going to be honest, and please no one crucify me out here, I can't stand her music. I'm sure she's a wonderful person, and she's probably really cool and very rich, and that's great for her. But we kind of know she's not really goth. She's also very open about
she's so very open about not being goth. She has said in multiple interviews that she really likes and respects the goth community, but isn't a part of it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when we're in 2021, hopefully there are people out there who equate wearing all black or a lot of black isn't just the one thing to be goth, but there's still going to be people out there, and I don't know, it's just nothing to get mad over, in my opinion. Like, if people want to see Megan Fox and be like, oh my God, she was in that movie that I can't remember the name of, where she ate a man 20 years ago and she's hot again, like, whatever. But I don't know. I think goth fashion is great if you're about it. I'm more into drag fashion now, but also like, the music is a big aspect of it. So that's the tea, I guess, on my end.
I think I wonder how much, and then maybe this is a question to pose to a question, of how much the pandemic has changed people's perspectives on their general mental health, their well-being, their feelings of isolation, which all of these things are associated with the goth culture, and everybody's like, oh, well, you guys are a bunch of self-deprecating cutters. And there's all these horrible stereotypes that get thrown at the goth culture and the community. But there is a commonality that happens, I think. A lot of us, we went through traumatic events when we were growing up. A lot of us felt like we didn't fit in. So I think a lot of that gets reflected in the clothing that we choose and the colors that we pick out and the palettes that we have for our clothing and our makeup and things like that. I just watched, or I listened to Man in Black by Johnny Cash the other day, and he talks about why he wears black. And there's a lot of good things that he talks about where he wears black for people that are downtrodden. He wears black for people that are poor. So I think there's a mental aspect involved with the clothing, aside from the musical aspect and wanting to look like the bands that you enjoy and fit in with a group of people that you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts with. So just to pose a question, I wonder how much the pandemic has affected our society in general, with everybody feeling isolated. Do they equate more with what is termed goth? Because they understand, feeling this isolation, feeling this depression, this horrible outlook on life of everything's going wrong. Like next week it's murder hornets. The week after that it's asteroids, So anyways, that's just my 2 cents.
Do you have a thought on that, Trey?
Yeah. So
I'm sure you have a thought about that.
Of course. I think it's very mixed. I haven't seen or heard much specifically targeting goth specifically. I have seen potential things with people who have folks that are part of the goth subculture in their lives have been coming to them for, how do we deal with this being alone and not being able to socialize and not being able to go out? It's sort of the extroverts reaching out to the introverts kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We've definitely seen that to some degree, though I've not seen it really equated particularly with goth. It was more equated with, you're someone who spends a lot of time by themselves at home. How do you exist that way? What can we do?
Can I ask you?
Fortunately, they haven't gone down that path, but yeah, I could see the subtext. There's also been a lot of news. I think it started slightly before the pandemic, but a really big, especially over this last year around the Olympics, with mental health awareness, with the gymnasts who were bowing out because they weren't feeling up to it. So this idea that people who everybody looks up to are being honest about mental health and feelings and emotions, and not just being a spectacle for fans, and that coming into work-life balance discussions for office workers, dealing with the remote workforce and all that stuff. So there's been a lot of these aspects that goth culture has addressed and talked about and been sort of championing for years to some degree, that have now entered the discourse in society as a whole, which I think is really a positive development, even if it's not saying or calling out, and now we're being goth, which is probably for the best. I would be annoyed, I think, if that happened too. But the fact that these issues that we've been championing have become things that can be discussed in public society, whereas before it was all, don't talk about that. We don't want to deal with that. We want to bury our heads in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. The fact that part has changed is an amazing development, and probably one of the very few silver linings from this whole pandemic situation.
100% agree. Yep.
I think, I've been seeing a lot of people complain online recently about, or maybe discuss online about, non-goths dressing in goth style. And I do agree that it can be frustrating, but I think there can be a positive side to that sort of dissemination of fashion, because I think it opens more people up to different artistic expressions, and in a way that's relevant to me, like gender fluidity in a way. Fashion, like I just saw, going back to TikTok, I don't know why that's come up so many times on this episode, a TikTok about fashion in the 17th century and how it was seen as the domain of men, whereas now obviously fashion is kind of seen as like a woman's thing. Whereas I was just at Target the other day, and we had to go to the men's section to get something, and it's just all like plaid button-down shirts and athletic wear, and it's all the same color, and it's really generic and boring. So you have this like patriarchal division of fashion, and I think that does a disservice to everybody. So if subcultural fashion is spreading outside of our borders, and people are decorating their bodies and modifying goth artifacts into something different, I think that can serve to like expand the way that people view themselves and the way they view others, and make, in a roundabout way, kind of make the world a safer place to live in. And I honestly, like, because people get upset about it. I don't think it's impossible to tell the difference between someone who's goth and someone who isn't. And I don't think the person who isn't is even going to know or care about goth subculture. So I don't see how that influences what we're doing. But honestly, like I'm so far into the cult that I don't even know what's going on outside of goth anymore anyway.
Yeah, I get on Twitter and like there's always someone discussing the goths or the people who would dress like goth and are posers. And I used to worry about what the posers were doing when I was younger, but now it's like I don't care. Like if they want to wear whatever, man, like who cares at this point?
The positive side of that is there's going to be, you brought up Hot Topic. Like for me, when I was a kid, I was a mall goth, and I got all my clothes from Hot Topic, and I wore trip pants, and those were the people that the goths now were making fun of as posers and that kind of thing. But that was my part of my introduction to experimentation and how I saw myself. And so I think if anything, it should, because especially on Twitter or places like that, people sort of project who they think this person is that they saw a photo of and assume a lot of things about them. And I think it should be more of like, if you're really concerned, engaging with other people and finding, sort of humanizing them, see what common life experiences you have. And instead of creating a sort of like boogeyman.
Yeah, just find out what's drawing them to the aesthetic. And why, I mean, there are millions of aesthetics out there that you can choose from. There are tribes and subcultures and all these things that have a look, and they're all over on Instagram and TikTok and all that. And you can pick from any number of them. So having that discussion of why did you pick this one? And maybe it's some good reason, and maybe it's something that can go to a deeper conversation. And maybe it was just, some misunderstanding, but having that conversation is the important thing. And kids are kids, and they're going to be experimenting with all different styles and looks. That's what you do as a teen into your 20s, is you explore things and you try stuff out. And that's not a reflection on the subcultures that they try out. It's simply what kids do. What happens then with those subcultures as they get older, as they last longer, that's where, you see what has staying power and what was just a fad. But just taking what the kids are doing as sort of a statement on the nature of subculture is, in my mind, just ridiculous.
I was just going to throw in one other aspect that we talked about, people calling people names and being a poser. And I went through that because I was a skate kid and I used to skateboard and stuff like that. But what I think was most detrimental in a larger perspective was, I'll take the example of, I also listened to ska music, and I would go to ska shows down in Ithaca, and you'd go see, say, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones for $10, and it was a great show.
Yeah,
and then they would go get a hit on the radio. There was a period in the 90s where like every third song was Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, the impression that I get. And they just beat the hell out of that song. And then you had Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish and all these other bands that came out of the woodwork. And you started to see the influx of all these young kids coming into the scene that had never been there before. Yeah. But and that was cool because it was expanding the scene and expanding people's experience with the music. The problem that I always had was the corporations would get involved and they'd be like, well, we can charge $35 to go see Mighty Mighty Boss Tones now. It's $10. Yep. And that was the hard part that I always had issue with was you get this influx of all these new people. Somebody's there, rubbing their hands together. Hey, I can make money off of this, and you see that on Facebook all the time, these fly by night ads for goth clothing, and basically they stole someone's art off of Etsy and put it on a t-shirt, and you order that cool looking shirt, you never get the shirt, and the money is just gone to the ether.
Or you do, but the original artist never gets anything from it. It just goes to some corporation.
Yep. I'm actually, I apologize if I'm throwing out a lot of names. I don't want to give the impression that I'm a name dropper, but I have a relationship. I am friends with Dave Navarro from James Addiction.
Oh, nice.
And I saw a pair of Vans shoes that were skinned with the artwork from the album Ritual de la Habitual. Okay. And they had the album art on the Vans shoes. And I was like, wow, these are really cool shoes. And I messaged Dave and I said, hey man, I just saw some new shoes that you guys put out. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. And I sent him a link and everything. He's like, yeah, we have nothing to do with that. There's a bazillion of these. I'm like, well, should I report it? He's like, you can if you want, but these places, they're like gophers. They just pop up and go back in the hole and pop up somewhere else. And there's no point in trying to chase them. So even the larger conglomerates that already are established and making money off of merch, they're still getting screwed too.
The same thing happened to me. Every couple of years, I'll sell a Cemetery Confessions shirt for like a month, and I sell like 20 to 60 shirts depending on how it goes. And even from that tiny little number, there's these third-party T-shirt websites that will copy the image and put it on the website to sell. Like, no one's buying this, so why'd you even do this in the first place? All right. Well, let me, to kind of get back on track, I did want to ask about being a goth or an alternative person in Arkansas. What is that like in your daily life? Sort of, do you have to change your appearance? Do you have to deal more often with, dealing with people, or is it just pretty normal? You don't get a lot of problems. That was really poorly phrased, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a panini press still. I don't really go out of the house. If I go to school, I have to wear scrubs. They make us wear scrubs, so I get to wear gray scrubs. Not very exciting there. Or I go to Walmart and I back when I was younger, I would try to dress up and look ooky spooky and all black everything. But now I just don't give a shit about looking any sort of way when I go to the grocery store or wherever. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I guess when I was younger, being goth in the South and, small towns in Arkansas, there is, I don't know if y'all have ever been out here, but very religious, very conservative, very homophobic, transphobic out here still. I mean, there have been advancements, a little bit. Like we got, schools have the Rainbow Alliance for the gay alliances and stuff, which is great. Yeah. But like there's still that air of that. So I used to get a lot of, shitty looks and stuff. Got called a devil worshiper a lot. Didn't really take offense to that because I went through a period of thinking Anton LaVey was really cool and rad. There was this dude in my high school who used to call me Marilyn Manson at the time. And like I hated Marilyn Manson even back when I was a teenager. And like I just didn't like his music, but it would make me really mad when people would call me Marilyn Manson. I'm sure everyone here has been called Marilyn Manson. I would get so mad. Like I just get so mad over that. And it was, a stupid thing to get mad over, but I would. And then when I went to college, the first college I went to was a very religious college. Like it wasn't officially like a Christian college, but it was just in a small town that was really religious. And I got a lot of shit there. Like no one physically harmed me there. But one time the Christian Baptist club of that school decided to paper my car and flyers for their church meetings. And like I tried to talk to the resident advisor about it, and she's like, "Oh, well, they just wanted you to go to church. Why can't you understand where they come from?" God. But that was like, and that is just one of many things that happened there. But that basically tells you what it was like in that town and some of these towns. My second college, which it was in a bigger town, so I didn't really deal with a lot of shit there. I had a Death Hawk at the time and got a lot of looks for that, and that was kind of understandable. But I'm at a third school now, and I got to wear scrubs, so, But I don't know. In drag, I feel like I don't go to Walmart in drag. I'm not going to do that. But I feel like when I do go out to clubs and stuff in drag, if I go to Taco Bell or another bar afterwards, I do get some looks, but no one's been really mean about it yet. The only like really mean comments I've got in drag were like, well, you're a girl, you can't do that and stuff like that. But the thing is, one, I'm non-binary, I don't really identify as a girl. And two, like I can do what I want, like like not to get too graphic, but I too have to tuck. Gay cis men are not the only ones have to tuck. So and like if that's not the only, qualification to do drag. So that's really the only comments I got. Being goth in the South, I feel like, there's still that air of wanting to be the same old, I guess, out here. But I feel like that's kind of dissipating as the older generations, and excuse my language if this sounds harsh, as they die off.
That's how change happens.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't grow up in the South. I grew up in upstate New York, and there's been a lot of parallels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, between small town New York and small town Arkansas, you've got the heavy country and Western contingent. You've got the heavy R&B hip hop fans. What we used to call them white caps. The kids that would wear, the white baseball cap that would say Cox on the front or something like that. The preps. I'm finding as I've lived all over the country that, there's going to be those elements no matter where you go. And in the South, they're just known for it a little bit more, being, misogynist, racist, you name it. What I try to do as I've gotten older, and I didn't really figure this out, and I wish I had when I was younger, was to have fun with it. And what I've done with some friends of mine that we started out in the Bay Area was we were in a van going over the bridge to San Francisco, and we were going to go bar hopping. And it was probably 10 of us in the suspension troupe, and we're all wearing black. And it wasn't necessarily because we're all goths or that we're all metalheads or anything like that. It also came by necessity that we're theater people. So stagehands wear all black.
Yeah.
So, everybody was all dressed in black. So I said from the back seat, I said, okay, we're all dressed in black. There's about 10 of us. Somebody's going to say, are you guys in a band? And I said, so what's our band name? So what are we going to tell people our band name is?
Oh, shit, that's great.
Without missing a beat, a buddy of ours said, well, let's call ourselves Nightworm. And
Nice.
From that point on, we created this fictitious band. So whenever people are out, when we're in a group, they're like, hey, are you in a band? Yeah, I'm in Nightworm. So
Now, is that worm with a Y, or do you have a U, or is it a U with an umlaut?
no, just spelled as it is.
So with an O.
Yeah, with an O.
Straight.
Yep.
All right.
We actually made merch and everything else. We had fun with it.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, I think are you in a band and you look like Marilyn Manson are the catchphrases of my entire existence.
Well, I usually just get, where I can get some weed.
Yeah, see, I don't get that very much for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, that's because you probably could. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I did, I was wondering sort of how you feel in relation to the goth scene outside of your area and how much support or how connected you feel you are. Because I saw this tweet from, I think the account name is Marcusel. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'll try and link it. But the tweet said, y'all don't even understand how much white supremacy relies on us believing that the southern U.S. is a hellscape infinitely more racist than the northern U.S., which I think is a great point because people outside of there tend to write it off and completely ignore the poor people, the marginalized people, and the activists that are trying to make change in that state. So I'm just wondering how you feel about that, or just about the goth scene in general and tours and how connected you are that way.
So yes, but I will say, in the South, there are a lot of racist, homophobic people, and it's usually the older generations or the people who were just, kind of born into it. But I think that a lot of the younger people, I'm a millennial, so I guess I can include us too. And even some older people who, are questioning, and realizing, this is some bullshit, this is fucked up, and trying to do better and be better. And, we got Lucy's Place out here, which if you've probably never heard of it, but if you haven't, it's like a queer, safe home for queer kids. And,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is great. As someone who came from a small town, and I will say I came from an area that was very racist and very homophobic and very white, and, getting away from that, and it's so much nicer. And you realize, getting away from that, that there are people who, see that that's not the way to be and that that's utter bullshit. And those people do exist out here. I mean, I'm not like, the South is not completely a big racist, homophobic shithole. I mean, that does exist out here in the South. We bled red in the last election. I think in the last 2 elections, I think. So, there's that. But there are people out here who, are trying to do better and be better and realize, that's some bullshit. We got to be better and, better people. But tour wise, I can't really think of many bands who have come out here prior to Club Nevermore that I would have really seen. Even drag performers, that have been on the one show that we will not name, or Dragula, they don't really come out here. But Club Nevermore has had recently the Destroyer, I hope I'm saying that right, and, Clusters of Fornication, who is Arkansas based, but still they came out this last time. So I feel like Club Nevermore is really trying to get people to say, hey, we're in Little Rock, come see us. We got the people who will come to your show. We're awesome. We will give you the monies and a good time. So that's cool.
Love it.
Yep. On the racism side, and there's just flat out history of the South being racist, and then there's a variety of different reasons for that. But somebody growing up in New York, there was just as much racism there. It's just it's handled differently. Yep. Like it's like this thing that you just don't talk about. It's like, oh, those people that live over there, you just don't talk about them. Yep. We're like, well, why? Why do what's wrong with them? There's nothing wrong with them. So it was a different mindset. I've experienced living in the South. Folks tend to be more vocal. Yep. You can just be flat out blatant racists, just like, oh yeah, blah blah blah, and say something horrible. Whereas, up north, they would say the same thing, but they'd just say it with a little bit more politeness. And it was just kind of like, really? Did you just say that? I know you just said it that way, but it's still wrong.
Oh, we've definitely mastered that technique out here in the upper Midwest too. The so polite, but not so good.
The number of times I've heard a sentence start with, I'm not racist, but.
Yeah. But in terms of the touring acts and stuff like that, like Dagger said, we are trying hard to get us on the map here in Little Rock. If you look at the map of the United States, we're kind of a nexus of highways, coming through the country. And most bands are going to drive through Little Rock going from Memphis to Tulsa or to Dallas or to St. Louis. So we're on the way for a lot of these tours. So we're trying our best to get folks to come book here. Our problem in Little Rock is we have lack of medium-sized venues. We've got a couple of big stadiums, for like Tool and stuff like that to come play at. Yeah. Or we've got the tiny hole-in-the-wall venues that, are for the more underground bands and stuff like that. But somebody kind of middle of the road, in their stardom and in their draw, there really isn't a lot of venues here for that. So that's one of the issues that we're dealing with here in Little Rock and trying to work around. But yeah, that's something we're working on, is try to say, hey, we're over here. Come see us.
Yeah.
I love to see it.
Y'all are in Chicago, right? So y'all got like Comfort, Cure, and Replicant. I need to fax them and be like, y'all come to Little Rock because I want to see y'all hoes. So.
Well, let me ask a more positive question before I ask another more serious question. What are you looking? What's exciting to you right now about goth or goth music in general in the scene? What's really?
Gary, you can take this one first. I
could
think
be bands or
the
anything.
first, the other two.
For me, Dagger has a finger on the pulse for the newer stuff that's coming out, and I'm kind of playing catch up. But for me, what's been exciting has been to see the old staples, like Robert Smith working with some of the newer bands, or like I mentioned before, Trent Reznor working with Health. Gary Newman's coming back, and putting out new stuff. You've got Danny Elfman putting out new stuff.
Oh yeah.
So those are some of the exciting things for me, that it's not new per se. You know, it's some of the old guard coming in and mixing with the new blood. And I think that's exciting because it's introducing two different, you know, fan bases to new music. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, I don't know. I feel like in a general sense, bands in the goth umbrella, we're just going to say goth umbrella. I'm not going to name 20 different genres right now, but I feel like they're not afraid to be queer or be, you know, hey, I want to throw in some new wave into this dark waveness or death rockness. I like that. I appreciate that. Who have I excited about lately? Laundrette. I forget where they're out of, but they released a little release called Dressing for Pleasure. It's like a new wave, but like mixed with punk. It's like, okay, and I'm going to be honest, like I'm a little shallow. The whole reason I gave them a listen is because if you look at the album cover of this album, you're like, oh, that looks very similar to someone's drag. So I'm going to be honest about that. But their music is really bomb.com. Like, it's very diva, but like if you had a diva that was, yeah, I know I'm terrible, but like if you had a diva that was like new wave, also a little punk, that's how I would explain them. But yeah, who else? I do a podcast with DJ Hollow, who also DJs at Club Nevermore, but he's not here right now. But I do a podcast with him about music called On the Fringe / Shadow Transmission. And I feel like we have a lot of like people, you know, I try to keep a list like of all the emails I get from Bandcamp of new releases. And, you know, that's the one good thing about this pandemic. It seems like I've gotten a lot of emails about a lot of releases. So that's good. Yeah. But Double Echo recently had a release. Well, actually, I think it came out in June. But still close. And it was like, what was it? It was like Moon Emoji was the name. It was just like an emoji. But that release was bomb.
I listened to it. I don't remember what it was called.
Yeah, it's just like I'm 98% sure that it's just a moon emoji. Now I'll tell you, I have a Samsung phone, so I might not be seeing it right, but I'm pretty sure it's like a moon emoji, and that's the name. And I love it if that's the name truly, because it's like we're kind of going back to hieroglyphics. Like I think every band should do that now. We should just go back to that. Like, don't even send me a text saying what's up. Just send me like a bunch of horses and grass. I won't know what you're talking about, but it'll be wonderful. But
then we're getting into the like witch house bands that had wingdings for their name fonts and all that.
I was just going to mention witch house as one that was definitely doing the symbolic names.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the Norwegian black metal, you know, where it looks like a bunch of sticks.
Yeah.
And then Vision Video.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, wait, sorry. I was just going to mention Vision Video was a great find. I mean, I know that y'all all probably listen to them and know about them, but, you know, that was cool to discover. Also, Ritual Bell's newest release, I think it's called Keep Looking Down. That was a fucking banger. But anyway, sorry. You go ahead, Trey.
I don't think I've listened to that one yet.
It's hot.com.
Okay.
.org.
You got me dying with these web extensions.
I'm gonna have to kind of echo some of what Dagger Dance was saying there. One thing I've really liked about some of the modern bands is they've started to break out of these strict adherences to genres. Like you had the various revivals, whether it was the post-punk revival or the death rock revival, and those were all very, very much, they were revivals. So it was rehashing the same old stuff again, which was cool. It was nice to see modern production and some modern themes into music. But, you know, my passion, as I've harped on many, many times on this, was all about weird collisions of things that don't seem to make sense together. So I just love seeing in music in general, but also the new dark bands have been experimenting with adding different things to their music, merging different ideas and different genres in. I mean, things like seeing something like Clipping at a more or less industrial show as a rap act it's neat to see that. And as much as like SoundCloud rappers get shit on a bit and the whole mistaking goth thing, it's still there's some cross-pollination there. There's some influencing happening there, and I really like that. I like seeing all of these different styles coming together and creating something new. That's what made the post-punk revival so amazing when they were doing that back in the 70s, and what made sort of the flourishing of all the crazy music in the 80s and synth pop and new wave just that whole era was really, really exciting and vibrant because of all of this people interacting and taking little bits of all these different genres and putting them together and mashing them up in ways that oftentimes totally failed, but would have these little bits of sparks and moments where it would just gel and create an amazing thing. And I see us going through this right now as well, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, do you remember the genre college rock or college radio?
Oh, yeah.
You had bands like the B-52s or Talking Heads that like just kind of had weird, a mishmash of different styles, and you didn't know how to label them. You know, I felt bad for the guys at the record store. I was like, I don't know where the fuck to put this. You know.
Yep. I know. I love hearing that. I love seeing that happening in the scene. I like seeing us get away from the essentialist things as much as that is causing its own drama. But I am not all about essentialist stuff. So when bands want to pull an Andrew Eldritch and do everything they can to not be goth, I'm here for that if they're doing interesting things.
I'm assuming you like the album we're going to review later.
I did, yeah.
Well, for me, I guess to answer my own question, and move away from music actually, because we talk about music a lot and it's really important, but the thing I'm really excited about right now is the like subcultural media. So stuff like Procession magazine, which I just got the new issue of. And that's an obvious connection to music because like 90% of that magazine is band interviews, which is almost kind of novel in a way, because I don't know if I've had a goth magazine that's so heavily focused on so many interviews. But it's great. Like the writing reminds me of Gothic Beauty, and there's that nostalgia part of it that makes it feel like something special. But you've got like Obscura Undead has their Unobscured zine, which is sort of more of a revival of the underground zines from the 90s. And then you have bigger publications like Auxiliary Magazine, which is kind of turned into what Gothic Beauty used to be in a way. And then there's all these, I'm seeing like more people on YouTube and specifically like on TikTok, there are so many younger goths, and not even younger goths, just goths in general, doing really fun things on there. A lot of people are doing longer form audio content and podcasts and stuff like that. You've got a lot more people seem to be making jewelry and that kind of thing, like Junkyard Bat, who's in our community. A friend of mine from Chicago, Jody Crevens, she just had a belt show up on Angela Benedict's channel, and I got one from her as well. She does resale stuff, but creates like her own jewelry and stuff. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have stuff like Die With Your Boots On, I think they just opened a shop in Salem. But I'm running into all these like spooky, maybe not goth specific, but sort of related, like what was the one in, I think it was called the Arboretum in Colorado. Surprisingly, a lot of actual physical shops out there. And there's people doing just cool stuff like Goth and the Raw is this like vegan goth baking content, which is super cool. Yeah, stuff like that. I love the music, and that's really important. But for me, the sort of community around the music has been always more interesting and more important to me. So it's nice to see that there seems to be a resurgence or at least a thriving of the kind of art and creation side of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of I saw a video out of Mexico City, and it was basically like a guy walking around with a camera at their local goth night, and they had a whole dark market set up in the front of the venue. So they had people selling jewelry and shirts and dresses and stuff that people had made, and I was like, man, that is super rad. And we did that a little bit here in Little Rock. We had a dark market here, and we had a variety of different vendors show up, and we were selling, jewelry and, all different kinds of like little bobblehead characters like the Munsters and, all different kinds of different stuff that's tangentially related to the scene. And when we do events for the Halloween stuff, as is our obviously big holiday, I try to incorporate some of that stuff. I reached out to some of the vendors this year, and everybody's really like, yeah, I'm just not ready for the public yet.
Yeah.
So it's been hard this year to get folks to come out.
Yeah. That makes sense though. It's really weird right now.
Yeah.
The goth like discussion sphere always sort of cycles through these discussions. Like it's really popular to argue about if you have to be goth to listen to music, or it's really popular to argue about how important fashion is, or whatever, these kinds of things. The thing that has been more not novel, because this has been a discussion in the past, but the thing I'm seeing in like on different Discords and in Facebook groups and in personal messages and even coming up like in person is the issue of bands or artists in the scene who are outed as bigots or rape apologists or, problematic in some way. And then off of that, how we sort of what do we do with that in a club space, in our community settings? So I'd be interested to hear if that is a conversation happening, or what your general thoughts on that are.
I guess I'll go first. I don't know if I've ever talked about any of that in person, but I know on Twitter I've seen the news about people. Are we allowed to say names? I mean, I've already said Marilyn Manson. That was out there already. William Control, he's not really goth, but he gets played. We don't have time for that big argument. But and who else? Well, there was Somber.
There was
sorry, I can't say that name, but
we mentioned a few people on our Goth Praxis episode, but since then there were a couple more that came out, which were Mr. Kitty and these are like tangential. Mr. Kitty and Jimmy of MSI, who I think I have to say allegedly were in sexual relationships with minors. So yeah, not great.
I've online wise, I've been part of that conversation, seen people talking and chatting about those people and the things they did and such. In person, I mean, I've only been to 2 in-person events since COVID, but I guess not really. But I don't know if you're asking, but do I think we should keep playing these artists and stuff? No, obviously not. Like, why would we keep playing someone who is an abuser or someone who is a racist or something? Like, I personally don't want that in any scene I'm involved with, be it drag, goth, or underwater basket weaving. So I don't think these people should be given attention. Here's what I've noticed with Marilyn Manson. So please don't crucify me. A lot of people are kind of looking over it and like pretending not to see it. And I don't know if it's because they thought he was hot 40 years ago or if they really think his music's that good. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I really don't care. But no, I don't think people should be doing that. I think that's kind of like shitty to the people who were harmed by him. Mm-hmm. And same thing for everyone else who was named who has been outed as problematic. I don't think we should be playing them, but that's just me, I guess. What about you, Gary?
I tend to agree. Like, stuff came out with Marilyn Manson. I never really played very much Marilyn Manson, if any at all, and it was usually request. But even in my personal life, like, if I got Pandora or something on and I'm working here in my office, a Manson track comes on or something like that, it's a skip. I don't want to support the behavior by giving them, airtime in my brain. And it's a very difficult thing because there has always been artists out there that have engaged in questionable behavior. You could look at David Bowie, you can look at Sex Pistols, you can look at Led Zeppelin. I mean, I'm dating myself if I already haven't, but there's always been these artists that have these amazing creative thoughts and they put them out there successfully. But when you peel back the sticker and you look at what's really in the bottle, you're like, ooh, yeah. And we're in this information age where we know everything about everybody all the time. And it has lifted a lot of rocks, and we're finding all different kinds of bugs under these rocks now. Yeah. So there's a big, serious discussion that we have to look at, do we encourage this behavior by buying these, these pieces of music or going to these shows or, watching this movie, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in general, it's been healthy that we're talking about this now. That folks are not just like, oh, whatever, I like Bowie, I'm just going to listen to it regardless. Mm-hmm. I think it's good that we're having a dialogue, and ultimately at the end of the day, it's a personal decision that everybody has to come to. But I think it's good that there's a dialogue going on out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I am curious if either of you have thoughts on the club side of things, ways to make sure those spaces are not homophobic or, people getting in to the community that are causing those kinds of problems. Or if it's just like, people show up, we have a good time, make sure nobody gets in a fight.
From the kind of organizer of Club Nevermore, I deal with that to an extent with the Little Rock Goth Industrial Facebook group. You have to gatekeep in the sense of, we have some questions. There's a couple of questions in order to join. And if you can't be bothered to answer those questions, I deny your access to the group.
Yeah.
And then they're not hard questions. One of them is, what song was originally done by Iggy Pop that was covered by Susie and the Banshees? Mm-hmm. As a passenger. And then the next one is a general question, why do you want to join this group? Mm-hmm. And if folks can't, answer those two questions, anybody can Google the first one.
Exactly, yeah.
If they can't be bothered, that's a good indicator of why they're there. Like, oh, I'm looking for a big titty goth, whatever. Yeah. I don't want those people around, I don't want them in our group. I don't want them at our club night. And with Nevermore, the Facebook page, it's a lot more open. It's not a private page. Right. So we have every stripe of folks, that comes in there and says things. And sometimes we have to deal with that. But with the venue that we perform at every second Saturday, I've spoke with the promoter that I have a relationship with, and that has always been at the forefront of our concerns is you have a bouncer guy that you bring in. We know the bar next door may not necessarily be, the people that, are up and jumping around about goth music or industrial music. Mm-hmm. But I want to make sure that we're not going to come off as being elitist and exclusionist to those people.
Right. Yeah.
But I also want to really, really impress upon you that if somebody comes over here and starts bullying people or starts making comments, I want you to take your bouncer guy and ask them to leave.
Yeah.
And we have a really good understanding in that aspect. And he says, yeah, that's not a problem. The venue we work with, they have their own opinions on masking and vaccines. Mm-hmm. And they are tolerant of what we have put in place, where we have asked for people to wear masks, where we've asked for people to show proof of vaccination. So we have a good working relationship with this venue, and that's very important for any scene, for no matter where you are, is to be able to work with your venue. Because if the venue is just all about bodies coming in the door,
yeah,
it's conducive to an environment where your date rate is going to get, people
right,
shit
yeah.
And, all that ugliness that happens at a lot of clubs that play pop music and things like that, where it's just a factory of getting people in the door and drunk.
Yes, thank you.
That's not really what we're about.
Yeah. Let's do this. Where can you mention the Facebook page? Where would you like to direct people to get more info about Club Nevermore or even your personal stuff?
So we are pretty much Club Nevermore everywhere. We are facebook.com/Club Nevermore, Instagram.com/Club Nevermore. We have a website, clubnevermore.com. We have merch. It's clubnevermore.bigcartel.com. So we're out there and we have a brand unity going on. So everything is Club Nevermore. There you can find on our website information about when our next events are. We do every second Saturday at the venue we're at. We're just outside of Little Rock in Sherwood, Arkansas. And like I said before, we run 8 to 2 a.m. And typically the cover's about $10. We try to keep it low cost. Because, folks aren't making millions of dollars out here, yeah. And want to have it an exposed market to as many people as possible. I don't want a barrier to be, I can't afford to go. Yeah. And we're also working on trying to make it all ages, because right now we are 21 and up. So those are the places you can find us. And Dagger, did you want to speak to?
Oh, yeah. So like I do a podcast with DJ Hollow, who is with Club Nevermore still. And it's called On the Fringe Shadow Transmission. We are on Spotify and Apple Music for people who are Apple people. I'm not one of you. Maybe one day I will be, but for now I'm not. But yeah, it's on Spotify and Apple Music, On the Fringe of Shadow Transmission. And we're like, if anyone wants to send us music, I'm not the one who deals with that side of things, but DJ Hollow is. Just send it to the Facebook page. It's just simply called Shadow Transmission. I think the rule for that is you got to have at least 7 or 8 songs for us to listen to and review. But we got a long list. I'm going to tell you that up front. But anyone out there is interested. And drag wise, I'm working on my craft right now, getting through. I got a busy semester because I'm trying to fast track this program. So kind of trying to get through that. And then I'm just going to work on honing my craft. And then I'll eventually be doing drag nights around Central Arkansas.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I didn't realize you had a big cartel page. I am buying a shirt right now.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, and I was also going to say, Dagger mentioned Lucy's Place for the month of June for Pride Month. And the shirt's still up there. We have a Club Nevermore logo shirt that I put together that I bounced off Dagger to get her feel for it. It's basically, it says Club Nevermore in a rainbow pattern. It tries to address all of the different sub-genres of the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. And all the proceeds from those shirts go to Lucy's Place.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff on here. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate both of your time. I appreciate your thoughts and for dealing with the scheduling nonsense that we went through. This was really nice to get to speak to both of you and get your perspectives. So thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, it was fun.
Album review.
This time around, we are reviewing the newest album from the band. And this is not from, I don't think this is even from this year, but I was so taken with this album, I thought it would make for an interesting review. When did this come out? August 1st, 2020. So last year. Wow. Okay. So the sort of blurb on their Bandcamp page says they consistently manage to create a tripped out creep chamber with room to explore as the aura builds to nightmare crescendos juxtaposed with shaking silences. Simultaneously eerie and serene, with each new release, we see more and more of what makes this group so essential in the canon of modern music. So I am going to play the first track. I think just because it sort of fits more obviously into the genres related to what we're interested in. So here we go. All right. So, Trey, you know, I've always said the key to happiness is strapping a magic wand to my cock and shoving a kumquat up my ass.
Absolutely.
But I think I may have found a new source of joy in life, and it's this album as a whole. This falls perfectly into the goth adjacent category that people like to use. You do have similarities to goth bands, like at least what I picked up were bands like Faith in the Muse, Dead Can Dance, Virgin Prunes, Dynalakayan. It even at points reminded me of the soundtrack for Suspiria, weirdly enough. But newer bands like Double Echo also came to mind because you have the goth touchstones of the reverbed vocals and post-punk guitar riffs, hypnotic drum lines, and there's some spooky synth in there. At times, interestingly, it kind of borders on something you'd hear in like a Halloween music soundtrack. Like track 2, I think, is kind of an example of that. The vocals, when it comes to the vocals, there's singing, there's shrieking, there's otherworldly cackles and disembodied modulated spectral cacophonies of sound. So you get quite a range of experiences throughout the album. It does, I think, go a bit into it becomes a bit cartoonish at times, which I don't think is a bad thing. But track 3, for example, sounded something like I would hear on a haunted carnival ride, but it's weird and different, so I liked it. The weirdness, I don't think, really overstays its welcome, because it really shifts from track to track mostly, and it also in that way doesn't feel like it gets stuck in one genre either. And I think track 4 is a really good example of that, because you get this switch into what to me sounded more like psychedelic stoner rock of the 70s. And that was interesting to me, because that's something you can hear influencing early goth bands, but I don't think that's something you necessarily hear now in today's music. And so I think as far as goth is concerned, that has potential to add something really interesting to the canon of dark music. And then you have that sort of 70s vibe carries on into track 5 from a different perspective. And to me, this was my favorite track on the album. And I think listening through the album, but listening through track 4 before track 5 actually ascends that song into an even better song than it would be if you just listened to it by itself, which was really cool, because especially the first time I listened through, that really hit me in an interesting way. And I don't think that's something I've experienced from listening through an entire album for years and years. So I thought that was like for me, it seemed like a masterful piece of engineering. And yeah, that really became my favorite song. So for me, overall, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. It's been a while since I've done that, but it was good. I loved it.
That's a really good review. So I was very impressed with this band as well. I was really interested in it. It was very interesting to hear some of the kind of experimental noise collage, musique concrète sort of art music stuff out of the the 60s and the 70s that was coming in, especially early on. That first track, which I'm kind of surprised is when you played there. I get it later on, but it starts out as a very sort of experimental, almost musique concrète thing, where they're taking found sounds and looping them in rhythmic ways, reminiscent of some of those early like coil type type things. You were going to say something?
I was trying to find something that was both represented the weirdness of the album and the more familiar parts of the album.
I can see that, because it does start off very weird, but then when it gets into the groove, it's very much like something right off of Dead Can Dance's first album.
Yeah.
So it's not the sort of world music Dead Can Dance, but still that very experimental post-punk goth rock-esque Dead Can Dance that they were real early on. So yeah, it was a good thing. Some other touchstones that I heard, you mentioned the shrieking and stuff. There was a lot of stuff in there that was just like, oh yeah, that reminds me a bit of Damon de Galas, who I'll always drag out when we talk about bands with good shrieking sounds. Some other bands that came to mind had a little bit of like a Deform with the sort of experimental rhythmic type things, and some of the experimenting with language too, which Deform did. That third track that you said wasn't one of your favorites. I found really interesting because of it was just, where's this band from again? As they do a whole track with, Japanese, or I think it's Japanese. If it could be Chinese, I'm not 100% sure. Felt a little bit more Japanese to me, but I speak neither language. So I could be completely wrong. It could be none of the above. But some Asiatic language was the vocal, even though this is a Brazilian band. So they were really very a chameleon-like band. They would move around and do a lot of different things. But they did keep to a theme within a song. So it wasn't like some other bands that I enjoy, like the Mr. Bungle thing that I've said I really enjoy, where they will change sort of genre wildly in a Whiplash kind of manner every 15, 20 seconds in some of their songs. This will kind of take a song and establish a mood and put a bunch of things together that reinforce that mood. And that's a complete track. And then the next track may be something wholly different, or like you were saying with tracks 4 and 5, may feed one into another as a lead up. And I wouldn't say that, even though I am kind of saying that there's a lot of changing of pace, they're not a Whiplash. There is a progression through all of the tracks. It doesn't feel disjointed, but it is also, like I said, it's not a lot of the same old. It's not just taking a mood or a shtick and just doing it through the whole album. They've got a lot of voices. They've got a lot of styles that they're putting into this blender, but they're doing so relatively smoothly, and they're transitioning well between them. It's more almost like a DJ set that's not stuck in one genre, where they're just kind of doing a bunch of things, almost like what turntablism does a little bit. They're not quite as chopped as turntablism can be, but where they're taking a lot of disparate elements, putting them together in ways that fit, but are also still surprising and interesting. So I really enjoyed a lot of that. But yeah, it reminded me a lot of some of what was happening in the goth adjacent scenes in the late 80s and early 90s. There was sort of an experimental side of things there that was more melodic than the very experimental stuff that was happening in the late 70s, with the experimental, especially on the industrial side with your Throbbing Gristle, of course, and the Cabs and all of those bands, Einstützen and Neubaut and stuff like that. It's not getting quite as DIY punk, where it's really, we're just taking instruments and things and banging them and abusing them and twisting electronics and stuff like that. It's a little bit more refined than that, I feel, which is why I sort of key on the kind of art music ideas from starting really in the 50s, but the 50s, 60s, and 70s out of France and Germany, and some of those college-based experimental music groups with your Philip Glass and your John Cage and your Steve Reich, and some of those classical bands that were dealing with things like drones and repetitive rhythmic loops, and taking the sound of, a ball bearing rotating in a, like a mixing bowl, and then looping that and putting some reverb on it and making a track out of that by just sort of taking that rhythmic element and building off of that. So I feel it had a lot of that brought into more modern techniques with our very sample heavy environment. So I really enjoyed a lot of that. So yeah, overall, I did really like the band. One thing I was having trouble with, and as I guess maybe a knock on the band, and part of it's their experimental nature, but none of the tracks, even though they were all relatively unique, none of them really just grabbed me. So I didn't have I couldn't say, oh, I really like track X or I really love track Y. I enjoyed the whole thing as an aesthetic, but I listened to it several times at home, both on my, on my computer with my good studio monitors, with decent headphones or just on my phone or in the car as I was driving around. But nothing really said, oh, I really like this track. I just kind of liked the ambiance. And the album just seemed to end too. It was, it's a short album, unfortunately. So it always felt like it goes silent. And I'm like, is it done? Is there more? I didn't feel like there was enough, but it just kind of got into a groove, into a mood without really giving me any sort of album tracks that I was really jumping out as, oh, this is a favorite. Right. But I did really enjoy a lot of them. So that's not really a ding or either a positive or a negative. It's just a thing. Yeah. In today's music environment of everything must be a single and we need to be adding single tracks to a Spotify playlist, can be considered a negative. But if you're still a fan of albums and that whole just an experience of putting on an album and leaning back and letting it wash over you, I think this is good if you like that in sort of an experimental way with a little bit of sort of rock, a little bit of some drone, a little bit of some experimental sound collage, some hints of light industrial, some hints of goth rock. It was a melange of a lot of things. And if you want to have that just sort of mix of feelings and emotions that you can just wash over you and almost like a DJ set, this is a good band for that, or at least a good album.
Totally agree.
So yeah, I'd give it a 4.5. I'm not going to go on a full on 5 because, like I said, it didn't really jump out at me, but it was definitely a buy for me.
All right, it is time for Sinister suggestions.
So you've got to be interested in death. It's the last great taboo. It's the only taboo left.
Precisely. I mean, why is it, do you think, that everyone in here is dressed in black? It's a celebration of death.
No, I just like the clothes.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the clothes look good. Yeah, I mean, death looks good. Charles Manson, yeah? No, he was cool.
Don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually a vampire.
Sinister suggestions.
Now, Trey, do you have a sinister suggestion?
I actually do.
Excellent. So Why don't you share yours?
I've been sitting on this for a little bit now, but it's sort of a combination. There was a documentary that was it was a band documentary that was released earlier this year. Edgar Wright, who did like Scott Pilgrim and Shaun of the Dead and stuff like that. He released a documentary called The Sparks Brothers. And it's about a band I've been a fan of for quite a while called Sparks. That's the band. They started in the early 70s and are still releasing music today. Their last album just came out in 2020. I discovered them maybe 6-7 years ago. So I definitely haven't been a fan from the beginning. They're kind of hard to describe, but they've been an inspiration for a lot of the music we love. They've been name checked by, Joy Division. They've been name checked by Susie and the Banshees. They've been covered by Susie and the Banshees. They've been name checked by Depeche Mode, Faith No More.
Wow. So
all across the sort of alternative music spectrum, whether it is in the sort of goth post-punk or in the new wave. But I mean, there aren't a lot of necessarily musicians. Well, actually, it's a real mix. It's an interesting mix of people they've got to speak on this. So, I mean, you have like Michael Myers is speaking on there, the comedian.
Wow.
But you've also got Neil Gaiman is in the thing.
Okay.
You've got Vince Clarke, Nick Rhodes. You've got Weird Al Yankovic. Okay. So you've got a real Thurston Moore is in there for Sonic Youth. So it's just a real mix of people who are talking about how this band has influenced them. But they really sort of came out, like I said, in the early 70s, really out of that sort of glam rock thing. That's kind of what they picked up on early on, doing a very glam rock, but with that sort of art pop sensibility where the lyrics.
Patton Oswalt.
Yeah, Patton Oswalt.
Sorry, I'm watching the trailer.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm looking actually at a list of the people who are in it, and Patton Oswalt's on there as well. But yeah, they're a really interesting, quirky band. They remind me of one of my first favorite bands when I started getting into music, when I started buying it and I escaped from I'll just listen to what's on the radio or what MTV plays me. sort of like a They Might Be Giants, where there's this social commentary that's in there, but it's sort of twisted and abstract, and you can really sort of take their lyrics and do a lot of interpretation on what they're talking about. So that kind of over intellectual, as kind of mentioned in the earlier in the podcast, I think Gary mentioned it, with the sort of college rock type mentality, where you've got this sort of weird, too clever for their own good kind of thing going on. And I think Sparks really does that. But yeah, the first song that really grabbed me of theirs was actually the one that I didn't know was covered by Susie and the Banshees, because I didn't think of it, even though I'd heard Susie and the Banshees cover it, because I'd heard pretty much everything Susie and the Banshees had done at that point. But it's the song "This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us," which was one of their biggest hits, which they released. I think it was in 74, 75. It was on their Come Out of My House album, which was one of their first breakthrough hits, which was just a really influential track at the time. And obviously it got Susie Sue's interest enough for her to do a full cover of it. But that was kind of the first one I heard. It was just interesting and different how they were doing things. And then they mentioned it, I think maybe once or twice in the documentary, but their aesthetic, their look is very interesting, with the lead singer being very much a 70s rock star, your Robert Plant, your Led Zeppelin type, with the long 70s rock star hair, and the sort of flamboyant glam rock, sort of, David Bowie / Gary Glitter persona, that larger than life thing. And then the songwriter and keyboardist is a very buttoned down, suit wearing, kind of Kraftwerkian aesthetic. But I think one of the favorite quotes they like to, and it's played up as an apocryphal story, but when they played On Top of the Pops, apparently, I don't remember who it was, but I think it was like John Lennon or Paul McCartney or something like that, called a musician friend. And it's like, "Are you watching this On Top of the Pops? They have Mark Bolan singing to Adolf Hitler." Because
I saw
Ron Mile has the little stash, though he was more going with a Charlie Chaplin thing,
right?
Toothbrush mustache thing going on. So that was sort of the apocryphal story about their sort of buzz when they first got On Top of the Pops in the 70s on British TV. So there's that. And then, of course, my secondary recommendation is get into the Sparks. Just check out some of their albums. They've got a lot of albums. They're hit and miss, but, watch the documentary. It recommends a few things. But a couple albums, I mean, obviously I already mentioned it, but Come On to My House, which was, one of those first albums that came out. One of the early albums that had that track that was really popular. Trying to remember the song I really like from it is Dick Around, which is a great song that was really after losing my job and sitting around the house, I was really digging on it, because I mean the chorus is "All I do now is dick around." So it was great. But yeah, so that was a really good album that was very, very sort of theatrical, very musical theater, kind of reminiscent in its bombasticness of like a Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, where it switched between sort of a rocky thing and an operatic thing and a story-based thing. So that sort of stuff. But I mean, I really enjoy a lot of their tracks. They do have a lot of tracks out. They can be somewhat hit and miss, but it's just a fun band to dig into. So that's kind of what I'd recommend. And you can even go with their newest album. I think their newest album is pretty good. It's a Steady Drip, Drip, Drip that was released in 2020. So go from newest to oldest, or start at the beginning, however you like it. But I strongly recommend them. They're a great band that definitely influenced a lot of those bands that we really love today.
Yeah, that's amazing. I hadn't heard of either of these, but I'm definitely going to be checking both of them out. That being the band or the movie, obviously. So
sure.
Super cool. I appreciate you bringing that up. My Sinister suggestion is the book Waiting for Another War, which is essentially a history of the Sisters of Mercy from 1980 to 85. It is more, I've read a few of these sort of books about a goth band, right? There's a few about Bauhaus.
Oh, what band? There's no goth band there.
Joy Division.
They're
one.
A hard rock
There's,
band.
Yeah, right. The Cure one. There's a few of them. The what's the record label?
Beggar's Banquet.
No.
Project. 4AD.
4AD. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I kept thinking 45 Grave. I'm like, that's not, I know
They weren't
that's
even
not
on
right.
4AD.
And so this one gears or leans more towards the informational side than the entertaining side. So depending on what you're looking for, that may or may not be interesting to you. And it also, I mean, in my opinion, I'm not definitely not an expert on Sisters of Mercy, but I have read multiple accounts of them over the years. It seems to be a pretty glowing adoration of the band. There's a lot of interesting takes in the book. For example, when we read the book, The Evolution of Goth, there was a section in there on why Sisters of Mercy was actually a goth band and why Eldritch was actually a goth despite him denying it. Whereas in this book, they describe Eldritch as being unfairly labeled as goth by the media and misunderstood by fans as a goth, because both of those groups were unable to grasp the masterful complexity of his music and style, that kind of thing. Very much siding with Eldritch in basically everything. It really, and like it's at some points it feels to me like it kind of bends over backwards to do so. Like, for example, the author describes Marx as becoming upset about what the author says are small issues, like Eldritch always having his own hotel room while everyone else in the band had to share a room, which, you know, it kind of brushes those things under the rug. Like, there's a bunch of examples of those where I'm like, I think I would actually be pretty pissed if that happened to me, reasonably so. And then you have a lot of the tension in the band is framed as Eldritch being such a hard worker and overstressing on details in order to maintain the quality of the band, or just him. He's a quirky visionary, you know. That's just how he is. So I don't know. To me, it felt like a romanticized version of their history. But again, I'm just an idiot on the internet, so I don't know. As far as the content of the book, it largely focuses on information about the live shows, which was really interesting. There's lots of descriptions about what happened during the shows, and then that's kind of bookended with stories about the days leading up to the concerts, and then quotes from the music press and their opinion on the live shows afterwards. So that adds a really unique perspective that I appreciated, although I will say towards the end of the book it does get a little bit boring for me, but I mean, that's just me. I'm not like a huge Sisters of Mercy fan, even though I do really like them. But you do also, there is entertaining stuff. You get plenty of hilarious quotes from Eldritch and lots of great little stories peppered throughout the book. I think one I put on Facebook was they said when Eldritch was asked if he likes being compared to Bauhaus, he replied, "Who does? I'm sure Bauhaus doesn't like being compared to Bauhaus these days. I mean, they're dreadful." And then, yeah, you get excerpts from magazines like Propaganda, which was cool to see. Oh, one of the other fun, I don't know how fun this is actually, but one of the trivia tidbits that I found interesting was that Wayne Hussey was started wearing a cowboy hat. I guess that's what they would be called, those wide-brimmed hats. He started wearing those supposedly initially because Gary Marks puked in his hair the night after a show when they were out drinking. So he was the first to sort of start wearing that kind of hat consistently. And then later on, when the band was dissolving for the first time, and Eldritch was dealing with a speed addiction and poor diet and stress, his hair started to fall out. And so that was when he started constantly wearing the cowboy hat in that era. So just, little things like that I do find really interesting. Obviously, if you're into the Sisters of Mercy at all, or if you just enjoy those kind of histories of bands that were influential to the scene, then I think overall it's a worthwhile read, and a good addition to whatever sort of goth library you have. So it's fun, it's easy to read, it goes quick, and I enjoyed it, even despite my complaints.
Cool. It just as a clarification there, if you really like Wayne's hats and you're wanting to shop for them, I think they'd be technically called a gambler hat.
Gambler hat,
because they're the ones that have the sort of almost top hat looking center bit with the flat top, rather than the divot, where a cowboy hat would be more the bigger but curvier sides and then the big divot in the middle. Grab it from. So it's more of a gambler hat. So if you really like that style of hat, that's what you want to look up if you want to buy that kind of hat.
Cool. We got some goth hat lore on the episode. That's nice.
I say I'm a hat guy.
Yeah.
Start losing your hair, you become a hat guy. It's how it goes.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Trey. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. You too.
And that's it. Happy October. I hope you have many, many delightfully spooky activities planned for this season. I did want to mention, for those of you who are not following on Facebook or on Patreon or on YouTube, you may be wondering what happened last month. And so I will briefly summarize what was going on. I am dealing with a debilitating illness. I'm still not 100% certain we know what it is. And I was in bed most of last month, which makes it quite difficult to work on the podcast or any other responsibility I have. So I had to make the difficult decision to postpone for a month and continue seeing the various doctors I was seeing and taking having a variety of scans and other tests done to see if we can figure out what was going on. That has not been resolved. I'm still having health issues. I am taking some medications that have seemed to help keep the symptoms under control for the most part, so I'm able to get back into doing the podcast. You may notice that there was a YouTube video put up last month as sort of my thank you to everyone who continues to support us on Patreon to try and get some content out there. But yeah, I'm not out of it yet. I'm hopeful that I'm headed in the right direction, and hopefully this won't become an issue again in the future. We are but flesh and bone, so the only certainty of the future is that it is uncertain. If you enjoyed this episode, we will be returning next month with Jen and Dave Batts of Release the Bats in Hollywood. I know Jen and Dave are wonderful storytellers and incredibly effervescent, let's say. So I think that's going to be a fun episode. And I'm quite enjoying getting back to this sort of interview discussion style episodes where it's not so much hyper focused on a single topic, but more the experiencing a slice of goth life from somewhere in the world. So I hope you're enjoying these types of episodes as well. And if you would like to support us, as always, you can do that by going to patreon.com/cemetery confessions. You'll get some rewards and content and merchandise depending on what tier you sign up at. So that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. I really, truly do hope you have a wonderful autumn, that you're able to get outside with a hot beverage in a snuggly sweater and enjoy watching the colors change and the children laugh as they go around to collect candy. I appreciate you all, And until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.